Ambassador, I see that we already have a cooperation project coming up. So, the architects that we have brought, they are looking for cooperation partners here. So, use your time afterwards. The Association of Consulting Architects in Norway has an export project. That's why we are here. We want to investigate the possibilities of doing architect in other countries, and Turkey is a particularly interesting country to us. We are both in the outer zone of Europe, and we are facing the same challenges as to energy saving and submission of submission from buildings, and also to develop good holistic quality in our areas. To manage this project, we have Peter Buttensjön. He is the project manager with us, but he is also an architect and holds a degree in urban planning. And Peter, you will come up to me now, and you will give us an overview of a somewhat unusual urbanization project that has given specific architectural solutions. Welcome, Peter.
Is this on? Yes. And thank you, Ambassador, for your very kind invitation to Norwegian architects. My question, and I put this question with some risk, is that is there a Norwegian architecture that is relevant in an urbanized world, which seems to be directed more by influences from Madison Avenue and Hollywood than from anywhere else? Is there anything specifically Norwegian that could be of interest to us? And I'm going to give a 10-15 minute introduction to the Norwegian urban situation. And as I said, it's very risky, particularly because coming from a city which is about as large as a village within Istanbul, it's risky to talk about urbanization, even though we, as well as you, come from the borders of Europe. Is that something that we have to present to you? I think, to the extent that you know anything about Norway, it is not a specifically urban country. We are known for our fjords, for our old churches, the old buildings. We have been known, with some exception of the Vikings, who thought they would make an inroad in Istanbul about 1,000 years ago. We have basically been known as a rather peaceful country with no colonies, no imperial ambitions, with a lot of fjords, a lot of nature, a lot of mountains, a lot of fjords, a lot of forests, and this means that we've had a very slow urbanization. It used to be a rural country, a rather poor country, up until very recently. It used to be a place where some towns were developed because that is where the stockfish was brought in from the sea and put on the wharf in order to be exported to Europe and undoubtedly to Turkey. It used to be a place where the road would come from the countryside down to the fjord, where some storehouses were built. That was the way that we built our towns. Where the road came from across the mountains and had to be, and the horses and later on the cars had to be put onto boats to go to further places, further towns further away. It was places where small towns were built, and the small towns burnt down, and the small towns got rebuilt again, basically on the same sites where the original ones had been. So in other words, this is an urban history that is very un-European in many ways. We have had no cardinals, no popes, no sultans, no nobility, no invaders, who made our cities the way that we're used to them in Europe, fortified like this in order to prevent invaders from coming in. We haven't had any strong planning traditions like the one you see here in Italy. We haven't had the dense medieval cities with the private buildings being massed along very narrow streets, and the public spaces and the public buildings like churches and city halls being carved out of the urban mass. This was not a Norwegian situation. It was a much more informal way that we have developed our cities. It started, Christiania, which is now called Oslo, started as a Danish colonial town, which then became a capital when somebody carved a main street into the old city maze like this, and where the rest of the city just developed, just grew like this. And then what happened, I believe, and it happened more strongly in Norway, in Sweden and Denmark than in any other European country, was that the functionalist ideals that we inherited from, say, Le Corbusier in Paris, who tore down the whole of central Paris, at least on the drawing table, and rebuilt it as big towers of steel and glass. This tradition, this urban tradition, found a firmer, a better fertile ground in the social democratic or socialist Norway than in any other country. So in other words, the old city that I showed you on the left was on the paper torn down and rebuilt on the right in the new functionalist urban traditions. This is the way we wanted to do it. This is the way we built it after the Second World War. Simple, honest, clean, no excesses, no ornamentations. This was the way that our cities developed up until, at least up until the oil industry, oil and gas, and the enormous economic wealth started to influence the country around 1970s, 1980s, with a new urban life coming in, with recreational cities rather than working cities being the important part of the day. This new urban life means that now most people actually live in cities. Whereas we used to be a rural country, we are now a strongly urban country. Most people live there. Industry has moved out. The old shipyards, the old harbors have been rebuilt as housing in one town after the other all around the coast. People have moved in, and this is where the old shipyard used to be, now having been developed into a modern town right in the center of the city. And I believe the city planning director will talk more about this, the way in which our cities have been transformed like this. This rather fast, abrupt urbanization of a formerly rural country has posed to Norwegian architects some very important issues, some questions. And these are the questions that we are bringing with us to this meeting and this evening. And I think there are, if anything, there are 4 urban challenges that we're trying to meet, and we will show you some projects that try in different ways to respond to these challenges. The first one is the question of urban quality. How does a rural country develop urban quality through architecture? How do we manage to be clear about urban quality basically existing from 0 to 3 meters? It's the ground floor which has to be open, which has to be transparent, which has to invite us to come in. It is the public spaces which are important, and we are used to high quality in our homes, so now we also expect this same high quality out in the public spaces, like here in the city of Stavanger. So that is the first challenge, how to make an architecture that is responsive, that does not primarily build icons or monuments, but build low-key and high-quality architecture. The second challenge that Norwegian architects meet is that this urbanization process has to be done with people and not without or against people. It is very important to us. I think that urbanization is a central political issue. You cannot separate this from politics. You have to be very careful that what you do is responsive to the needs and the wants of the people. And we believe this is an issue that has been particularly relevant in Istanbul over the last year. So in other words, how do we make planning processes and how do we make an architecture that is responsive to a collective need, with many people doing things together? That is the second challenge, the process of architecture. The third one is that we believe that urban architecture has to be developed through a partnership between the public and the private sector. The city of Oslo cannot build a good city, and the developers of Oslo cannot make a good city. It has to be done together through a partnership, and this is very important to us. The city of Drammen could be developed only by the business people, the owners of properties, going together with the city government and the regional government and the national government to clean up the river, to clean up the shores, and to build a new city where the old one had been. And the fourth issue is the issue of sustainable building. How do we manage to build with nature rather than against nature? How do we manage to build new housing that saves energy and produces energy rather than expends energy and wastes energy? It's like the Americans here say, what a beautiful spot to build something. Norway is a beautiful spot to build something, but it's very important to us that we don't just misuse this opportunity to change the country in ways that we don't like to see the results of later on for new generations. So the question that we have put to ourselves this evening is, how do Norwegian architects respond to these challenges in an urban situation within an international urban culture? And we have 5 presentations of this, and we hope that if they don't give solutions that could be easily used in Istanbul, at least they, we hope, show some ways of working with these issues, these challenges, and show the will to build in quality, which we believe is the most important challenge that we have as architects. Thank you.